I find it so annoying because I see people all the time like, oh, Facebook ads didn't work for me. I'm like, what did you do? Oh, I ran £100 worth of ads, and that was 3 days ago, and nothing's really happened in the last 3 days. And it's like, honestly, go and slap yourself. You're an idiot.
Hi Dan, thanks for coming on.
Martin, thank you very much.
Good place to start, I think. If you just give a little intro, a bit about yourself, your background, it probably makes sense to talk a bit about Dent as well, because I believe that's your baby.
Yeah, well, background is as an entrepreneur. I've built and sold a number of businesses. I'm Australian by birth, but I've lived in the UK for 16 years. And I've bought and sold businesses over the last 20 years. About 12 years ago, I set up an entrepreneur accelerator called Dent. We do a couple of growth programs. We've worked with 3,800 entrepreneurs globally over the last 12 years in cohorts of about 50 at a time. And within that company, we've got a group of growth services companies. So we've got about 8 companies in the group that do a variety of growth services, from publishing and advertising and fundraising. And also a technology company called ScoreApp. So I'm the co-founder of ScoreApp, which is marketing technology. We run quizzes and surveys and assessments so that businesses can collect good data, grow their business off the back of that data, make better decisions. And we've made it really elegant, user-friendly, and that's growing quite rapidly. We've got about 2,600 clients globally using that.
I know it's made sense for Dent because of the type of business it is to partner, sometimes acquire other businesses that kind of fit into that ecosystem and make sense for your customers. But why ScoreApp? How did that idea come about? Because it's a bit different, isn't it?
ScoreApp was in 2015. We launched the Key Person of Influence quiz, or the Key Person of Influence scorecard. And it was an amazing breakthrough in our marketing. We told people to go online, fill in a scorecard and get an online score with a PDF report. And 90,000 people ended up filling in the KPI scorecard, and it generated something like £15 million worth of business off the back end. And it was just a highly effective way to engage with people as a first thing. Because when people hand over a lot of information and data about themselves, you can then have a very sensible conversation with them. It's a really warm, high quality lead. And we found that we didn't have to run big events and all of that sort of stuff that we'd been doing. We could just talk to people about their scorecard result and how to improve it. So it made us a lot more scalable, and it's available 24/7. Basically, it was just a really good marketing innovation that worked really well for us. So by 2018, 2019, a ton of people had noticed and said, hey, can I build one of those, like a lot of our clients? So we built about a dozen of them on WordPress using the agency that we've got, Sotec, which we recently sold. But we started building them, and we were charging about £8 to £12,000 actually for a setup of an online assessment to build them bespoke. And we did enough of them to realize that there was a bit of a formula to it. And we thought, you know what, let's just build this into a platform because everyone's going to want one of these. This is a really cool marketing innovation. So we've really pioneered this whole kind of online assessment, set up your own online assessment thing. And it just sprung out of us scratching our own itch, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this, if I've ever told you this, but I actually, so obviously I've done the KPI Accelerator program. I actually became part of that through a scorecard. So I went to an event in London where
you were part of that 15 million.
Yeah, exactly. I went to so I went to one of these I don't want to slate it too much, but I didn't really enjoy it. It was one of these events where everyone's selling something, and it's go to the back of the room and sign this form, and
That wasn't our event though.
no, it wasn't your event. No, it was one you were speaking at. So you
I
were
know
on just before
I know
Gary
the one
V.
you mean. Yeah, Gary
Yeah,
V. Yeah.
with Gary V. You came on just before him, and I remember you were the only one not selling. So obviously, apart from Gary V, but you were the only one not selling something. And I think you did a little Q&A after, and someone said, "What are you selling?" And you said, "I'm not selling anything." And there was a big cheer in the room.
I remember
But
that.
you did leave a book on
Yeah.
most of the seats. And
Yeah.
I think it was the KPI book. And I picked that up, had a little look. The scorecard was at the back. And I actually sat there in the room there and then and did the scorecard on my phone. And then I started having a chat with people, went through the process. And that's why I'm doing this podcast, because of that KPI program.
Yeah, perfect example. Elegant model, doesn't require a difficult sales process. So rather than like run to the back of the room, one size fits all, as soon as you filled in that scorecard, our team could have talked to you specifically about the things that matter most to you. So you might have said, "Oh, I've got a really great product, but I'm not good at pitching it." And it's like, okay, let's talk about that then. So basically, that was our business model, which means that I can stand on stage, deliver value, not have to worry too much about whether it'll turn into sales, because I know it will turn into sales.
Yeah. So I did want to dig into ScoreApp a bit more, because
Sure.
it's quite amazing what you've done with it. It seems to have grown just a crazy amount in the last. I mean, how long when did you start it?
We launched it in the pandemic, and it was sort of like soft launched in 2020, and then we kind of started scaling it up a bit in 2021. So the beta group of the first 100 clients was 2020, and then we kind of jumped it up to about 1,000 clients or so in 2021, and 2022 another couple of thousand clients. So yeah, we've just been moving it in stages, working with clients, learning what they like, what they don't like, what they break, and then making some adjustments, and then improving it and scaling it.
What sort of revenue have you grown it to at the moment?
So far, we're at about $150,000 a month. So 1.8 million ARR, 150K MRR. And we've raised just around $1 million US equivalent. Normally a lot of businesses at this point would have raised closer to 2 to 3 million. So we've been pretty lean, pretty careful with the money, and we've had great traction.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
at the moment, it's growing net by about 5 to 10% per month.
Yeah, that is awesome. Do you think, I was going to ask you about raising money, because did you do that straight off the bat, like very early on? And do you think you need to do that to be able to compete with a product like this?
I put some money in to begin with, just to sort of prototype and just sort of, get a few things together so that we could show investors. I'm a big believer that if your intention is to sell the business, you should go through a set of best practices that lead towards a valuable business. So one of those best practices is going through a number of investment rounds, which validate the business and validate the valuation. And it's kind of more valuable than the money itself. So it's almost like the process of having to explain your idea and forecast its revenues and show your assumptions really forces you into a diligence and into a mindset of building something that will be valuable. And provided you're going to talk to investors who are smart, like a lot of our angel investors are extremely experienced angel investors who have seen multi-billion-dollar companies before. And when you go and talk to those people, the value is really in the advice, in the process, and then ultimately in the kind of stamp of approval and validation that they give you when they do invest. So when you come to sell a company in the end, you need to build up to $100 million valuation. If you want to sell something for $100 million, you can't basically say that this company is not at all valued, hasn't been valued at all, and then suddenly it's worth 100 million. So when you go to angel investors and say, okay, let's come in at 2 million, now let's come in at 4 million, now let's get a few of you in at 8 million, now let's get a few of you in at 20 million, and then you might talk to some more VC or private equity money or some, family office, and they go through a diligence process, and then they come in at, higher and higher amounts. That gives a lot of comfort. It's called like a valuation runway or a valuation pathway or a valuation history. So it's showing the valuation improving over time by significant and successful, sophisticated investors. So that gives comfort to someone to hand over $100 million check further down the line.
How did you go about finding those investors?
Well, I'm a key person of influence, but
They come to you.
yeah, well, to a degree, yeah. There's trusted networks, but you essentially, what I did is I put on 6 introduction workshops, introduction events for angel investors, and the first ones were actually live in London in a private members club, and I just basically said I'm just on a mission to fill those up. So what I did is I reached out to people in my network. I reached out to people who are friends of friends who are sophisticated investors. I looked at people who had successfully exited their companies and invited them to come along and said, look, now you're post-exit, you may want to invest in or have a look at some of the new technologies. I credentialized myself and said I've built and sold companies in the past. This is latest venture is data analytics and marketing. Come and have a look at what we're doing. And basically I said it's an open boardroom session. So you just book in and come along and sit in on the session. So I went on the process of filling those. It's funny, by the way, if you go to Goldman Sachs and say, I want you to float my company on the stock market, what Goldman Sachs will do is get a team of young people on the phones to pick up the phone to institutional investors and family offices and book appointments for you to go and see them as the CEO. And you do what's called a roadshow, and basically Goldman Sachs just books you on the Goldman Sachs jet. Literally, they book time on their own jet and they fly you around Europe, and you go and meet some shipping billionaire in Greece, and then the following afternoon you're in Switzerland, and then the following afternoon you're down in talking to some oligarch in Italy, right? And you're going off and presenting and pitching over and over and over and over again. So it's a mini version of that, right? It's the same thing. It's just a mini version. So I'm emailing and getting on the phones, and I'm booking people into a boardroom, and then I present. So I show people this is what our plan is. I show them our slide deck and our forecast and our trends and our technology and what we're trying to achieve. And then I basically say, expression of interest form. Would you like to fill in a form that says what interests you about this? Would you be interested in investing? At how much? What level? What key questions do you have? Ongoing questions do you have? And do you bring anything to the table beyond money? So those were the things that I had on my form. Most of our investors filled in the form and basically said, if they had a question or what else they could do as an angel investor, what else they could bring to the table. Naturally our round was oversubscribed. We actually had more commitment than we needed, which is always a fun position to be in, to tell the investors that they had, investor might have said, I'm happy to put in 50,000, and you go back to them and say, look, we can take 35. Can't take 50. We need to shave 30% off because we're oversubscribed. We'd love to have you on board, but we can't take the whole amount. And they love that. They love to be told no. How do you know it's a good nightclub? Well, there's a bouncer on the door keeping people out.
So would you sometimes delay people to a later round or something like that when that happens, when you're oversubscribed?
That's exactly what we did. We said that we could take on smaller amounts than people had expressed interest in, and we said at future valuations we'll give them the first opportunity to come in with more once we achieve higher valuation. So we said, look, I think the first round was 300,000, and we split it in for UK investors. We split it as half of their investment SEIS and half EIS. So they got a blended tax credit of 40% tax credit between the two. And then we said, once we get to future valuations, you'll come in at the EIS scheme and you'll be able to put in more money once we hit those higher valuations. If you want to, and under no obligation to, but you've got the first right of refusal on our future rounds.
Yeah, I've been looking at that recently. It's a good scheme, the SEIS.
Yeah, really easy way to raise that first 150 grand. But I'm a big fan of what we did, which is we wanted 300,000. So we just told people it's a split. You get half SEIS and half EIS.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I really want to talk to you about how you grew ScoreApp so quickly, because that's how many users was it? You're at so far?
Well, the first beta group was 100. And then once we had figured out what are the features they like and what they don't like and what they use and what they don't use and what they break and what they don't break. Once we'd figured that out, we then scaled up to 1,000. And then we kind of hovered there for a little bit while we kind of had a look at what people do there. And then we currently up, the next jump was up to 2,500, which is what we achieved last year. And we're just kind of hovering there at the moment while we implement some new tools. We're embedding AI into the back end at the moment, and we're going to be launching those AI tools to our existing clients before we push too hard for new clients. So we're going to see how they use it and how they break it. And then our next jump will be up to 10,000.
Awesome. When I've been following some of your journey with this, I see you're on social a lot. You're doing workshops. You're still doing workshops for Dent. You're doing Zooms, private Zooms, and showing people how to get X amount of leads. And I just think Dan's just everywhere at the moment. And I know a lot of this is going to fall into that whole KPI method, but it'd just be good for you to break down how you went from an idea to growing it to such a large user base and still holding off on, not going too crazy with it. But there's quite some growth. Yeah.
So just help me refine the question. There was a bit
how did you go from nothing to growing it so quickly to what it is now? And how can someone follow that method and do the same?
Yeah, so about the first 1,000 clients would be hard to follow because I have a good following of people who'll just kind of, I've probably got a group of people who just follow me off a cliff. They're Dan fans, and if I said, I'm going to start manufacturing ice creams, they'd probably say, all right, we'll take the first batch of ice creams. So there are a group of kind of people who've been around me for 10 years and they'll just buy whatever I come up with. So I've got to be particularly careful that I don't just judge based on the sycophants. I've got to make sure that I judge whether it's a good idea based on the skeptics. So my first 1,000 clients were probably a lot of fans and people who have just known me for a while and follow me on social media and all that sort of stuff. But then once we got past that point, we had, so some strategies were sponsoring events. So we sponsored, I think, a dozen events at about 5 to 10 grand each. We basically, an event might have 500 people and we give them a free trial and we get to speak at the event and do a nice kind of, conversation. So that was good for signing people up at the event because they've seen me speak and had a free trial. So therefore it's a nice, easy, seamless. Once again, it's not selling anything because you just take a free trial if you want a free trial. And it really talked a lot about just us as a case study. So it was an enjoyable presentation as well. It wasn't an arm twist. So that was quite effective. About 30 to 40% of audiences would sign up for the free trial. So that was pretty good. And then we did a bunch of Facebook ads, and I would do a weekly introduction event. So every week for 2021, I ran something called 30 warm leads, how to generate 30 warm leads using an online assessment, 30 warm leads per month, using an online assessment. And I just focused on that sort of like that targeted group of people who didn't have crazy high expectations. I deliberately said 30 warm leads a month, not 3,000 warm leads a month, because I wanted a group of people who had low expectations and that we could exceed their expectations. So every single week, I'm running a workshop with about 30 or 40 people called Warm Leads. We had a couple of versions of it. I forget the other name we called it. I think it was called More Data, More Sales, warm leads every month. So we tried a few different headlines, and basically ran Facebook ads that said, would you like to attend this workshop on lead generation? And that generated just consistently 30 or 40 people, and people would book by also taking a scorecard. We promoted our own scorecards as well, the business growth scorecard, which booked people straight into the lead generation thing. We had the lead generation scorecard, which booked people into the lead generation workshop. So we did a lot of those. So Facebook ads into there, and then weekly presentation, educating people and showing people about what we do. 1 hour presentation, and when you get people who sit in for an hour, about 30 to 40 of them will then take, 30 to 40% will then take up the free trial offer. And then because they've sat through that hour, they've been educated on what to expect, and they're quite sticky. They don't churn as much as just people who came through, the standard channels. So that was good.
Is that a Zoom as well, or is that a live event?
Yeah, that was a Zoom event, Zoom, like live, but Zoom. One of the things that I like to do when I'm building a business is I like to be actually in conversation with customers as much as possible. So I'm not a fan of automating this. I'm not a fan of, I would rather deliver it 100 times in a row live, but in an environment where I can see people's reactions and see them engaging and see them asking questions, as opposed to trying to record something and just get people to watch the replay. I feel like, when you sharpen a knife, you've got to grind it with a stone, and then it eventually sharpens up. For me personally, presenting something over and over and over and over again allows me to sharpen that knife real fast, real sharp. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to, like a comedian can figure out what jokes get people to laugh by doing live presentations. When you see a comedian do something on Netflix, they've done that presentation 150 times. They've done that set 150 times, and they've actually refined it and refined it and refined it. It gets funnier and funnier and funnier and funnier. So by the time they end up doing the Netflix series, it's hilarious because they've done it 150 times, and each time they've learnt one tiny little thing that's a little bit funnier, and they've found just a funnier way of delivering the timing. And so it's the same as when you're pitching your idea. You're figuring out what people respond to. You're figuring out what feature they ask questions about. You're figuring out what they ignore, and you're figuring out which case study kind of multiplies or replicates well. So you're actually also seeing who shows up. So you start noticing, oh, okay, there's a lot of dentists on the call. Maybe this is interesting to dentists. So I
guess it's worth noting that you don't do these like normal webinars, do you? You do a Zoom call where you can see everyone and you talk to people.
I can see them, they can see me, the chat's open. It's like a group meeting. There's typically 40 or 50 people on a call, and I'm presenting my slides and talking people through and stopping at points for Q&A. So basically that's, so lots and lots of presentations, just presenting to groups.
And do you get all of those in via, I mean, I know there's other channels, like you've got the quite a big Facebook group, and there's the Dent audience, but beyond that, is most of it through Facebook ads, getting people into the workshop?
Yeah, Facebook and YouTube ads kind of are a good solid base of 20 to 30 people per week. And then there is there's the 10 to 15 people who just come through social. The most warm and friendly people are always my social media people. They're the ones who'll have their cameras on, and they're the ones who will engage more. But that's kind of like they pull the people who are like the 20 to 30 who came through the ads who don't really know me at all. They're just there skeptically. They don't even put their cameras on a lot of the time. They get kind of pulled in by the energy of the 5 to 10 people who came in through the social who are really warm and friendly. So, yeah, it's kind of like the ads provide a good base of 20 to 30 people a week, and then the social provides 5 to 10 engaged, friendly people a week, and then that makes up your 30 or 40 people who are on the presentation.
How do you find, because you hear more and more people these days saying, Facebook ads is a bit unsustainable. It's expensive. It's getting more and more expensive. How did you find that? Did you find you were getting a good return on ads? Do you do things a bit differently with that? What are your thoughts on?
Yeah, you got to remember. My background was running newspaper ads. Newspaper ads, you expected to get a phone call for every $100 you spent. So you might spend $7,000 on a newspaper ad, and it would be 70 phone calls come in. And give or take, that's kind of what you would expect, a lead for $100. And you had to figure out how to make that work back in the early days. And you had to get good at making sales and turning inquiries into business. So I think a lot of people are just soft. I think they expect the fish to just jump in the boat, and they're just, to me, it's an expectation thing. The expectation is I should be able to spend a few pounds or a few dollars, get a warm lead that clicks on a button and buys something. And it's like, what drugs are you smoking? Like, people just have never behaved like that in the history of Earth. Like, people don't do that for Apple. People don't do that for Microsoft, forget about it. So I just think people have weird expectations as to what is going to happen when they click advertise or boost or something like that. They think it's, it should be easy. It's like business is hard. The funny thing for me is that because I have a fundamental belief that everything's going to be hard and take a long time, and it's going to involve long hours, and nothing's going to work, everything's going to break. Because I'm really pessimistic about how hard business is, it always surprises and delights me that it's not murderous. And it's like, oh, that's nice. I only had to drag myself across broken glass today. That's not so bad. There was no hot coals in there as well. So, I just have low expectations. The reason that I succeed with advertising is I have extremely low expectations as to what will happen. I expect we might be able to get some leads, and then we'll have to work really hard to warm those leads up and make a sale at some point. And it's probably going to take 6 weeks. I find it so annoying because I see people all the time like, oh, Facebook ads didn't work for me. I'm like, what did you do? Oh, I ran £100 worth of ads, and that was 3 days ago, and nothing's really happened in the last 3 days. And it's like, honestly, go and slap yourself. You're an idiot.
Expect it to be instant, don't they?
Yeah.
I like what I think you do that's very different as well is people like to automate as much as possible. They want the ad to go somewhere, then they collect the lead, then that next part is automated, and then it ends up being a sale. Whereas what you do, I think, is quite manual still, in that you'll jump on lives every week, and there's a lot of interaction with customers or potential customers.
Automated money is the hardest money you'll ever earn. I know people who try and automate. You automate at the very, 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 very end of the process. But I know people who try to automate, and they've been in their business for 3 or 4 years, and they're up to $7 or $8 a month worth of revenue. And I think to myself, had you just gotten on a phone call with some of the people who showed interest, you'd be up to $100 a month. And oh, but I don't want to do that. That's hard work. Well, it sounds like you've done 3 years worth of work and you've got 6-7 grand a month and 6 or 7 grand a month worth of overheads. So you're still not even breaking even. You're still barely breaking even. If you were to factor anything in for your own time, the hard way is the easy way. The hard path is the easy path. Getting on the phone and talking to people, getting on a Zoom and chatting with people is the actual easy way to make money. The funny thing is this, that ultimately people buy because they feel a connection to something. And if you use marketing and technology to get in the way of that connection, you're slowing the sale down and you're reducing the amount people will spend. If you use technology to get closer to people, then you will increase the amount of money they spend and the speed that they spend. So most people are just making the fundamental error that they're using technology to put their clients at a distance. You want to be licking their face. You want to be literally grabbing the back of their head and licking their ears. You want to be as close as you possibly can to your clients and making sure that they unmistakably know that you care about the problem that they're trying to solve and that you're doing everything you possibly can to solve it. And that's who people want to buy from. It's really simple. Yeah.
I think one thing that people doing this worry about, and I know this is something that came up in one of your Facebook groups a while back when you were talking about workshops, was that question about probably a weird way to word it, but what if there are no ears to lick? What if I run some ads and no one turns up, or it's just really quiet, there's only 2 people in there? And so how, maybe it's a bit different for you because you have got that initial audience that can come in and turn their cameras on. But what if someone runs ads and they think, oh, there's only 1 or 2 people on this? Is there a way around that? Should you do them less often and just make sure you've got those numbers in first, or what's the best way to deal with that?
Well, there's a couple of ways to deal with that. Number one, business is just an experiment, and if your experiment fails, there's a lot of data that you can explore as to why it failed. Did it fail because the message was wrong? Did people book but not show up? Are we talking about our product rather than the problem that people are experiencing? So there's lots of things that you can, I just treat it with curiosity. I wonder why it failed. That's interesting. I thought that people would be interested in this, but they're just not, right? So that's fine. Like, I have no problem killing off a business idea fast. So maybe the answer is, this is just shit. No one cares. Or maybe it is, I'm just doing a really bad job of showing people how this could help them. Maybe I'm not connecting with people around the problem that they're experiencing, and they don't know that there's this thing out there that would help them. So you just have to, approach it with radical curiosity and just not take it personally. Like, the market doesn't really care about you. And if only 2 people show up, then you really want to figure out what was it, who are these people, why did they show interest, what was it about them that was fascinated about this, what clues are in that.
I was just going to say, yeah. I guess it could be a good product, but actually the workshop idea is just a poor idea and not well communicated.
Yeah, so essentially you've got 2 problems. Number 1, building something of value, and number 2, being perceived as valuable. So and it tends to be that it's rare that companies are initially good at both. Most companies are either really good at talking a good game, but they can't live up to it, or they're really good at building something that would be valuable, but they're not very good at talking about it. So essentially, you've got to figure out, do I have something of value that's not perceived as valuable, or how many of there's 4 combinations. You either don't have either of those things, you have both of those things and you're succeeding. You got one of them and you need the other one. But ultimately, it really comes down to, have you built something that's valuable, and are you perceived as valuable? And ultimately, you need to just double down on whatever's not working. So it's a pretty simple problem. You need to be perceived as valuable. How do you be perceived as valuable? Well, you've got to make sure that people understand that there's a problem that they have that's getting worse and more painful, but you have an antidote to that problem, and it's fast and it's affordable. And if people connect those dots, then they're like, bite your arm off.
Yeah, makes sense. Would you say there's anything else you guys have done that have really, aside from things like the workshops and driving traffic in via ads there, is there anything else you guys have done to really help with that growth curve?
Yeah, we have done some really clever SEO. We've got this guy called Martin on our team who wrote hundreds of blogs and articles that were based on search terms that people were looking for. And that has been helpful, right? That gives us a good steady stream of ads, of views. So that's been helpful. Let me just zoom out a little bit. So those are all tactics. Let me take you behind the scenes of our team. So every 90 days, the whole team gets together and we really think hard about where we can get in the next 90 days. And we do an alignment session and we make sure everyone on that session is fully aligned to just a couple of goals, that we all know what are the few things that we want to achieve in the next 90 days. What information do we need? What targets do we want to hit? What tactics, what ideas are we going to go with? And we just kind of discuss that stuff and we lock horns about a few things. We all put forward our best thinking and, shoot down some ideas and build up some ideas and go through that sort of process. And normally half a day every 90 days. And that we prioritize getting that in the same room. So we actually hire a boardroom and get together. And then every week we have a Monday morning ritual, which is, about everyone declaring what their 3 to 6 things are that they're doing that week. Friday afternoon, we kind of check off, did we get them done or not? Are we on track, off track, or done? And behind the scenes, we're just constantly nattering about how the hell to get this thing across the next thing. So realistically, what actually works is not any of the tactics that I've mentioned. What actually works is having a team that knows what they want and that is willing to fight for it and come up with ideas for it. And when it doesn't work, they're willing to dust off and come up with another idea. And ultimately, the key thing that works is having that team dynamic behind the scenes. Because look, it might be live workshops this week or this year, and then in a year from now, maybe it's newspaper ads or radio ads, or maybe it's sponsoring the side of a bus. But it's the team that's going to figure out whether that's the new thing that works, and it's the team that's going to get punched in the face if it doesn't work, and it's the team that's going to have to wipe the blood off the nose and come up with a new idea if it doesn't work, and have another go.
How many people did you say that was? How many people?
Well, we're up to about 17 people currently, and we have a core team of about 5 that are like our core management team or core leadership team. But mostly the alignment sessions are now, everyone who can be there is there. Okay,
awesome.
Yeah. We still actually, believe it or not, we still actually have some developers in Western Ukraine who can't leave. They're amazing developers, and they're just obviously in a war-torn country. So we zoom in with them when we can. But yeah,
is all 17 of those people full time, or is it a bit of a mix? Some freelancers, or
yes, well, some people are contractors because they're international. So we got a couple of customer service people in the Philippines, and we got someone in Australia who does the Australian Asia Pacific time zone for building, and we've got someone in Canada who's doing the US time zone, and I think we've got 1 or 2 who might be part time, So I think it works out at 17 full time equivalents and probably 21, 22 people.
Awesome. We're not far off time, but I really did want to ask you as well, is more of a kind of time thing, because like I mentioned earlier, it feels like you're everywhere sometimes and doing so much. You mentioned just before we hit record that you have eight businesses you're involved with. You have a family, you've got 3 kids, you've got a lot going on. You're doing live workshops constantly. So simple question, how do you do it all?
Yeah, good question. It's just a team effort. So I'll be really honest with you, right? So across all the companies, there's about 100 people. So there's 800 hours a day worth of stuff going on around the businesses. well, assuming people take a lunch break and maybe they're not productive, it's something like 600 hours a day across all the businesses. And sometimes though there are people on the team whose job is to make it look like we're everywhere when we're actually not. Sometimes it's just video that is running and stuff like that. So it might look like stuff gets everywhere. And then I've got a great, we've got a nanny, so we have support with that. So nanny, the nanny picks up the kids from school and then does the after school routine of homework and dinner and all of that. So, I'm not going to lie about that. That's something I've worked to get into a position where that's affordable. That's able to happen. I've got an executive assistant who manages my diary and who makes sure that she filters stuff in and out that should be there. And we have budgets, so advertising budgets and boosting budgets and those sorts of things. So we've always worked on about 9% of revenue goes back into ads with most of the businesses, which kind of gives that. And we've got a great leadership team. So the leadership team gets a lot done without any involvement from me at all. So then it's sort of like, well, what's Dan meant to do? And my role is just to be the figurehead for the businesses. So, let's talk ScoreApp because we've been talking about that. ScoreApp is mostly run by Steve. Steve's my co-founder. He's technical. He's the guy who builds the tech and runs the tech team. And Jake is a phenomenal marketer and he's running the marketing side. And in many cases, I just get to show up and look pretty. And I just get to do the customer facing stuff. So if I have a big idea for we should do this thing with the technology, I can talk to Steve about that. If he thinks it's a good idea, he can add it to the list of things to talk about with his team or not. If he can placate me and just say, yeah, great idea, Dan, and not do anything with that, which I'm sure he does sometimes. But, but it just leaves one job for me, which is to just be customer facing and just to be out there, kind of talking to people and all of that sort of stuff. So I don't know how helpful that is. I've always started with teams. When I've very first businesses I've started several businesses. I always start on day one with me plus 3. There's a 4-person team on day one. And this is no joke. Everyone thinks they're going to run onto the field, score a goal on their own, and then recruit someone to come play with them. And it just doesn't work like that. You've got to run on the field on day one with a team. You can't rob a bank on your own. You've got to have 3 or 4 people who agree in advance how you're going to work together, and then you can have a getaway driver and a safe cracker, and then you go and try and rob a bank. And it's the same as a startup. All these people who are like, oh, I'm just going to go and do it on my own for a year, see what happens, and then try and recruit a team. Nothing's going to happen. There's no business that could run like that. I mean, imagine you inherited a day spa. And you think, okay, on day one, I'm going to do the massages myself, and I'm going to do the front desk and the bookings, and I'm going to clean the place. I'm going to open it in the morning and close it in the afternoon, and then I'm going to clean the pool at night. It's like, this is nuts. This is not that you are going to run yourself out of business real fast. No one's going to want to come back and see this. This is not a good look. So there's no business that just doesn't rely upon teams. So. I worked with a company in Boston where it was a group of consultants and they proved their concept with about 12. And then we put on a 3-day conference and we rebuilt the team with 45 people. So once they had proof of concept, we literally brought 45 people together, ran a 3-day conference, and we went from a 12-person company to a 45-person company in 3 days. And that's what it should look like. Should look like that.
Maybe on a smaller scale for some people to start with.
Yeah, well, 4 people, right? So the first salesperson should be on a very low base and a very high commission for sales. The first ops person should be, paid bonuses based on performance. You need to learn how to work with the wrong people before you get the right people. The first people who will show up will probably be rebels and misfits. So, you need to work with someone who can't get a job in corporate because, they've got a disability, or someone who's very, very young. They've just dropped out of university. Do you know, I've hired people who are ex-felons. I've hired a guy who came out of prison, a young guy who went to juvenile prison, and I met him through a prison program, and I was inspired by his redemption story, and I wanted to bring him onto the team. He would not get a job in most places. I have hired people who've got fairly profound disabilities, who can't work within like traditional workplaces. I have worked with lots of young people, who are kind of not academically gifted. They're lost. They're in that kind of age 20 to 24 where they're just lost and looking for something. And I put them to work. I've got a general manager who runs millions of pounds worth of business in a millions of pound division of the business, and she's got no academic qualifications. She used to run a call center, and she's just brilliant. And if she were to go out somewhere else, they would just look at her academic record and go, "Oh, well, you don't have an MBA and you don't have this. You can't run a company." But she bloody can. So you got to get good at working with rebels and misfits at the beginning, and then eventually the super talent turns up once it's already too late. Once you've already gotten to the point where you've got it and passed the difficult part, then you get the super talent turning up.
I suppose finding people like that is a skill in itself sometimes, isn't it?
You just go down to McDonald's or Starbucks and find someone who's got spark and say, "Quit your job and come work with me." Ask around your friends, who's got a kid, right? Who's got a teenager who's at a loose end? I need someone who's going to help me with my business. Has anyone got someone who's finished their school, hasn't yet, found their thing, who can do a bit of part-time work with me? Go and ask around who's semi-retired, right? Who's 65 to 75, who has discovered that retirement's a bit shit and they want to work with me on something. So just rebels and misfits. Go looking, but ask around your networks, put it on social media, go down to the pub, ask the guy at the pub, who do you know who's looking for something? Like, just go, and get used to saying, quit your job, come work with me. I once signed up a guy. I went to get a phone, sign up at O2, and the guy was so helpful. He was just so bright, just a real bright spark. I said, "Do you like working at O2? He goes, "Yeah, O2 is pretty good. What do you want to do later?" I want to, probably, I'm not quite sure, maybe do a bit of this. Have you ever thought about one day that you'd be an entrepreneur? And he's, "Oh, no, I've never thought about that." I said, "You know what? One of the best things I ever did at your age was I quit the corporate world and I went and worked with a startup, and I ended up working. I now have my own company, but I ended up working for an entrepreneur, and I learned a lot about entrepreneurship. What do you think about that?" "Oh, that'd be cool." I said, "Great, I've got a startup. Why don't you quit your job and come work with me?"
And did he?
The punchline to that story sucks because he didn't. But I guess the point is that that's how you do it. Just tell people, quit your job, come work with me.
I think I remember you saying once, when people are on the phone to you with cold sales calls, sometimes it's annoying. You don't necessarily want to buy what they're selling, but actually listen to them, because if they're good on the phone, it's worth having a chat with them anyway.
Yeah, sell them. Hey, it sounds like you're pretty confident on the phones. Is it hard to sell these pots and pans? Yeah, it's really hard. Okay, what about come and work in my tech startup? Okay, cool. So I just spot people all the time. I was in Switzerland the other day, and there was this baggage handling, lost baggage counter. They lost one of my bags, and there was this guy who was speaking in multiple languages, solving people's problems, super polite, super lovely. And it was only the fact that I was in Switzerland and I was kind of on a rush, but my brain was just going, bam, bam, bam. This guy, hire him. He's a keeper. And, I could see that if he's sitting in a lost baggage claim, solving people's problems day in, day out for minimum wage, this guy is an asset. But I'm just sitting there, like every fiber of my being was like saying, Dan, hire this guy, right? Get him on the team. I didn't end up approaching him, but you need to develop that radar where you're just going to try and grab people from wherever you can.
Yeah, that's awesome. Dan, I feel like I could pick your brains for hours and hours, so you might need to come on for a round two at some point.
I hope people enjoy it.
Yeah, before you go, where can people follow you? Where can people jump on the Dan train?
So people can get a copy of the book Scorecard Marketing, and I'll give you the link to that, where they can get a free copy of the book Scorecard Marketing and see what we do with scorecards. Take the Key Person of Influence scorecard so you can actually see what it's like to take a scorecard, and I'll give you the link for that as well, so you can kind of see whether you're a key person of influence, and you can also have an experience of what that looks like and what it feels like to go through that process. And then if you like that, then check out ScoreApp, get a free trial and see if you can set up your own assessment. And what's really fun at the moment is using AI to write all the content for your scorecard. That's fun too.
Which sounds like it's coming to ScoreApp soon.
It's going to be there in a couple of months.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Dan. Appreciate your time.
Cheers, Martin.